A friend with whom I often visit national parks suggested that before I left California for an extended trip abroad, we should go to the only national park in California neither of us had ever been to, Channel Islands. Channel Islands would be my 9th national park in California and my 43rd national park overall. Either together or individually, he and I have visited all the other California parks, including some of the more remote or obscure ones, such as Lassen and Pinnacles. Of course, I will be covering many of those in future installments of Walt's Wanderings. Subscribe so you don't miss them. As the name implies, being islands, the park is only accessible by boat. There are 8 islands in the U.S. part of the island chain, 5 of which are part of the national park. Santa Catalina, the most famous of the Channel Islands, is not a part of the park, but much of its land is protected. The Wrigley family, that of the gum and baseball stadium fame, own the island and have placed 88% of it in a nature conservancy to protect it. When I lived in Los Angeles, I went to Catalina quite a few times, both by boat and plane, when a friend who had his private pilot's license used to fly us there. That's him doing the pre-flight check on the plane, and that's me next to the plane. The photo is a few years old, obviously. Visiting Channel Islands National Park requires a bit of planning because the boats to different islands leave from different harbors, Ventura or Oxnard, and not all the islands are open to visitors year-round. And the limited number of boats meant we were not able to get a booking on one of the days when we wanted to go out to one of the islands and kayak through the sea caves, but it was booked up. It's about 22 miles to Anacapa, the smallest island of the national park. On the cruise out, we saw a few whales, but very far away. We could just see their flukes and splashes, but it's still fun to see them on their annual migration. At first, we thought the 2 hours we'd have on the island before the boat returned wouldn't be enough, but the island is small, and we were able to hike all of it in that time. Once the boat docks, passengers must climb a ladder to disembark, then once on the dock, have to climb 154 steps to the top of Anacapa, all of which sits on a plateau high above the water. Once atop the island, the main thing there was to see was gulls, lots of them. Western gulls, to be precise, and most of them were not happy. They were not unhappy with the tourists, they were unhappy with each other, and we saw lots of fights. Sometimes a third gull, apparently the partner of one of the combatants, would join the fight. It was hard to tell if they were grabbing their partner or the opponent to help. Oh, wow. We had been warned to be cautious where we walked. The gulls sometimes nest wherever they feel like it, including right in the middle of the path. There were gulls everywhere. It reminded me a bit of my trip to Rasa Island in the Sea of Cortez, but that's a story for another episode of Walt's Wanderings. There is very little human infrastructure on the island. There is a lighthouse, but it's not open to the public. It was a fun trip, and the excursion company had given us just enough time to tour the entire island without getting bored. Then we reboarded the boat to return to the mainland. While waiting for everyone to board, we watched waves go in and out of a small sea cave that then belched them back out.
What do you think about this?
The return trip again took a little under 2 hours, but it didn't seem that long because the weather was great and there was lots of sea life to see. The boat's captain and the naturalist on board were good about explaining things, including the difference between seals and sea lions. The animals are both members of the pinniped family, but the easiest way to tell the difference is that sea lions have external ear flaps and can walk on all fours, almost like a dog. Seals just have flippers. They have to sort of glump along on their stomachs. And we again passed the arch that is the symbol of the national park. Unfortunately, this part of the California coast is also dotted with oil rigs. This one was burning off some gas. And from the beach in Santa Barbara, several more oil rigs were visible. The next island we visited was Santa Cruz. Waiting for the boat to leave Oxnard Harbor, we saw some interesting birds and some of the boats that the National Park Service uses to visit the islands. Santa Cruz is much larger than Anacapa. It's about 22 miles long, about the same distance we have traveled to get to it. We passed some buoys on the way on which sea lions were sunning themselves. And we saw more seabirds, including lots of pelicans. This is my friend's video of the pelicans he shot while I was busy shooting photos. Seeing pelicans at eye level, they look like pterodactyls, and you can see how they are descended from those prehistoric birds. Our first destination on Santa Cruz was to go into a large sea cave called the Painted Cave because of the multicolored rocks in there. The cave was large enough for the boat to go fully inside, and we saw the colored rocks all around us. I was impressed with the skill of the captain to keep us stationary in the cave without having the boat hit any of the walls. I had never been in such a large sea cave, and we all agreed it was worth the little extra money and the extra time we paid to do the side excursion before returning to the pier to be dropped off. One of the highlights of our cave visit were the sea lion pups we saw within the cave. Some of their parents were swimming around in the cave, but their babies seemed content to sit on the rock and wait for mom or dad to come back with dinner. As we left the cave, we saw lots of adult sea lions in the water. The naturalist on board our boat explained that the animals will stick up a flipper out of the water to help warm them up. As the flipper warms up in the sun, the warmer blood circulates to warm their entire bodies. Sort of how a human might stick one foot out from under the covers to cool themselves down, but not too much, on a hot night. We saw more interesting holes through the rocks around the island. The fog made it a little difficult to get some decent photos and at times obscured the boat from the island. We did make it back to the dock to disembark on the island. And once again, it was a little tricky to climb the ladder to the pier from the rocking boat, so the crew only allowed one person at a time to climb off so they could watch each passenger and be ready to catch anyone who lost their footing. And they insisted that everyone have both hands free to have a good grip on the ladder. A long pier led to the island. The national park was created in 1980, and since then, the Park Service, along with the Nature Conservancy, which controls much of the land in the park, has been removing many of the man-made things on the island, while debating if its signs of its ranching history should remain. All of the cattle and pigs and sheep have been removed, as have most of the non-indigenous plants. We did a nice little hike on the island, but weren't lucky enough to see any of the foxes, the only large mammal on the island, which some of our boatmates did. At the top of the hill, the fog had cleared and the light clouds made for a beautiful day. After the hike up the hill, we walked the peaceful beach for a little while. Many people had gathered seashells, but had left them behind. It is illegal to remove anything, including rocks and shells from a national park. Then we reboarded the boat for our return trip. On the boat ride back, we encountered a large pod of dolphins. They were all around the boat. The crew estimated that there were over 100 of them. Everywhere I looked, there were dolphins. I've seen a lot of dolphins in the wild in my life, but this was more than I had ever seen all at one time. The boat crew said that sometimes they saw super pods of thousands of dolphins. Everyone was quite excited to see them. I asked one of the crew members if he was still excited to see dolphins after all his years in the water, and he said yes. He said it was like if you really like dogs, just because you saw one yesterday doesn't mean you wouldn't be excited to see one again today. The dolphins liked to surf the bow wake, and although it was hard to get a good video of them doing it because they kept slipping back under the boat. It was a great end to a fun visit to Channel Islands National Park. On the next installment of Walt's Wanderings, we'll visit a different sort of aquatic life, leatherback sea turtles in Michoacan, Mexico. Subscribe so you don't miss it.